The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Ben Ark from LN Bits,
Hello, Shemael.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor,
Hello, sirs and madams.
Daniel from Nodestrich,
Greetings and salutations.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one. Bitcoin flirts with 38,000 as a spot Bitcoin ETF. Hopes encourage the bull run. Bitcoin was inside of $38,000, a level last seen in May 2022, amidst an ongoing rally spurred by expectations of fresh demand for the fledgling cryptocurrency from exchange-traded funds. We talk about them every week. Ben Ark, what do you think about the ETFs and Bitcoin 38K?
Got another delay, haven't we? It always happens. They announce an ETF, they put in their filing, and then we get a delay, and then it doesn't go through. But I mean, it is perfectly, it's allowed for the SEC, and it's a good thing that the SEC have these delays because they are actually trying to analyze the offering and see whether it is, because they need to ensure safety for the institutional investors. I'm not that excited about ETFs in general because I just feel that currently one of the best ways for institutions to invest in Bitcoin and also Nostr, well, I suppose Bitcoin in this context, is for them to invest in companies and the industry, whereas I feel these ETFs could perhaps pull some of that funding away. Maybe not, maybe chicken and egg, maybe it'll encourage more investment by big funds, and then we'll also have more investment in companies and industry as well. But we're getting there. We've got some big players. BlackRock's a big player, and it's a good filing. So it's one of these things which we talk about every week, and then 1 week it'll just happen, and we'll have that Bitcoin ETF, and the price will go crazy, particularly alongside the halvening as well. Like the amount of people which will pile into Bitcoin. That's how we get to our 230k, which is where we're heading, I think, next. So yeah, good luck to the ETF people. It's not something I'm personally going to buy, but it will help those pension funds get some Bitcoin in their portfolios. But then I hope they also do continue to invest in companies.
Don't forget 600B, $600 billion per coin. Dan Eve, will the ETF get us to 600B?
Well, there's definitely generating a lot of hype, right? There's now so as Ben was saying, I was going to actually about the investment being taken away from actual core Bitcoin companies. Well, hopefully this will actually not take investment away, but all the hype that Bitcoin's getting will actually bring more funds into the ecosystem. So it'd be good if it complements all the actual investment that's going into existing Bitcoin companies. But it seems like we're definitely on a good trajectory for December, which historically has been pretty bullish, apart from last year, December 22. Since 2014, it's been a generally bullish month. And it seems like it's going to continue that way, although we could have a really bearish January 2024 if the ETFs get rejected and everyone's all sad from that. Also, maybe the people pulling out to pay for taxes and stuff like that, especially in the UK, because taxes due on the 20 in January. But yeah, I think ultimately there's going to be a lot more interest in Bitcoin because of the hype, not just because of the price. We've got the halvening and the ETF. It's like a double whammy now. This kind of whirlwind of things to talk about, and then not just that. As we said before, we're seeing more studies around the positive effects of Bitcoin on renewable energy and that side. So we might have the holy trinity. What was it? We discussed it a while back, like the holy trinity of things. So I think that could be a whirlwind of fun for 2024.
I think it could be a perfect storm. We had Uptober, Upvember, Upsember. Daniel, is this how Bitcoin just keeps going up, a combination of the ETF and the halvening? knocking us into insane prices like $600 billion a coin?
It's going up forever, Thomas. Well, we have an October,
Well, it does make you insane, doesn't it? Like if you're in Bitcoin a little while and you're like, yeah, that pack of gum I bought, yeah, that donut I bought, that's worth $10 now. That's worth $100 now. Like, and it just keeps going up. And you're like, you remember that advice I gave you 10 years ago where I said, hey, buy some Bitcoin? And they're like, yeah, we ignored you. Well, it's 10 years later, and my advice is the same. You should buy some Bitcoin, right? It's still there.
It might catch on and you might want to have some. It does. But yeah, so I think we're in a good place right now. I'm happy that it's not moving too quickly. We've had a really good year after an incredibly bad year. And not just a bad year for Bitcoin, just a bad year in general. With the beginning of the war in Ukraine, there's so many different external factors that have affected financial markets, and you can't place it all on one specific thing. But last year, there was a washout of a lot of the worst actors in the industry, and now a lot of that's coming to a conclusion. SBF's going to jail, and hopefully forever. Like, we won't have him in the next bull run. Maybe someone else will come along, and it'll start all over again. But that at least is off the table. And then, Dan, you said the halving is coming up. Most people don't know this. They haven't been paying attention. The people who just see Bitcoin as a price on a screen and don't understand the asset and the intricacies of the code, they're not looking at that. And so it always catches people by surprise. Every 4 years, it's almost like you can set your watch by it. People just come in when they see activity, when they see everyone's talking about it, when your Uber driver's talking about it, your barber's talking about it. That's probably the time you want to start, beginning to ease yourself out of things. But for now, we're in a holding pattern where most people just aren't paying attention. They're tuned out. There's so much other stuff going on in the world that when it's time to pay attention, they'll FOMO in, as they always do, and the fundamentals won't matter to most people. That's just the reality of human psychology.
I think you're right, Daniel. It does feel like the end of Goodfellas. They're playing the song Layla, and we're seeing what happened to each of the criminals who wronged us during the last cycle. And there's SBF hanging up in the freezer, dead, his shaggy furry hair. Moving on to the exit question. BlackRock files for spot Ethereum ETF. The price of Ethereum promptly goes down 5%. It was a real buy the rumor, sell the news event. But a larger issue raises here. As discussed and predicted on this show, there will be altcoin ETFs starting with Ethereum. Ben Ark, which altcoin ETF will be next? And will you go as far as to guarantee a Dogecoin ETF?
It'll be a Noster coin ETF.
Noster coin. Uh-oh. Dan, Eve, which ETF will be next? Name an altcoin.
I actually think so. Aside from Bitcoin and Ethereum, I reckon it's going to be something like, I think it'll be something like Litecoin or even Bitcoin Cash. Like it wasn't. And the reason is that those four, right? So Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Bitcoin Cash. Well, aren't they in I can't remember what was it. Oh man, that's completely escaped me now.
Like the predictions of that time
Fidelity
travel
or something? Was it Fidelity? I think wasn't it like Fidelity that's starting up some sort of exchange with with those four currencies? And although it sounds crazy, it's because they've been around for like 6 years or something. Obviously, Litecoin a lot longer, like 10 years. So I think that's more likely than something like I don't know, Polygon ETF or something crazy like that. But isn't it crazy though that it jumped like 5% on the news of the ETF, but of the potential Ethereum ETF, and isn't that just an absolutely micro movement compared to what imagine if that news had come out like 5 years ago, that would have been like a 50% up in a day. So isn't it crazy how things have kind of settled down now? We're kind of the days of the insane like mega pumps that would happen over 24 hours.
It's such a sign of acceptance of a major institution, not only of Bitcoin and the idea of cryptocurrency, but even the idea of altcoins and trying out projects and things that might not even work, getting their own ETF. There's still a chance, though. I haven't heard anyone say Ripple or Hex. Daniel, do you have an altcoin ETF you're looking forward to?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it, but yeah, there's I think Solana and Cardano are probably going to be uh easy picks for an ETF, and I'm also thinking they might just end up doing a basket ETF with multiple tokens because why not, right? If you want a shitcoin, you got to do it all. Just do it all. Throw them all in together in a big
I do
That's
mix.
love
like,
the
yeah,
idea
that
of
I
having
was,
a basket
because
that includes Dogecoin. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead,
that would be
Ben.
like the Nasdaq or something, wouldn't it? Like, I could imagine something like that happening as well. That kind of makes sense. But
Well,
it's good that the SEC has to like review all these things because it starts to understand the differentiation between Bitcoin and the shitcoins and things like Solana. So, hopefully they'll learn from that process.
that's it. Citadel. Sorry, it wasn't Fidelity. It was Citadel. They've got an EDX with it's going to their potential EDX is going to list Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Bitcoin Cash, which is quite random, I think, for those. But what is funny is that some random person registered the iShares XRP Trust in Delaware and then tried to attribute it to BlackRock, who turned around and went, "No, it's nothing to do with us, you crazy sausages." So even like the Ripple shill army is still going for it, right? But we're all their crazy little dirty tricks trying to pull off these moves. Oh, that must be very sad being an XRP holder. It really must.
Well, I think there's a lot of people with some very heavy bags who will be happy to see any of these things take off because, what do they say? A rising tide lifts all boats. Well, in this case, I think the market will come back because people will try to FOMO into something. Hey, Bitcoin's too expensive. Let's buy one of these micro caps. The same way you would maybe with penny stocks. I think it's just again, it's like human psychology. People always look at price, and that's the main thing that excites them.
It's the power of lobbying as well, like all that value and capital which you can use for lobbying to try and get your ETF through. Something like Solana, they've got a lot of money to throw about. They're the ones, by the way, who offered to buy Nostr.com, and I said no. So
Ooh, and again, just how far we've gone that they could be offering these ETFs, and there's a real possibility that all the lobbying we did for the Bitcoin ETF turns out to everybody else showing up as if they ran the marathon by getting on a subway car and driving right to the end of the race and popping up. Here we are. Here we are. Josh Shigala, what do you think about altcoin ETFs? Will there be a Dogecoin ETF? Pressure is on.
I don't know about Dogecoin, but absolutely there's going to be altcoin ETFs. Why not?
And what do you think about the price of Bitcoin almost hitting 38K and perhaps a perfect storm next year with an ETF approval followed by the halvening?
Oh yeah, the halvening is going to be massive. I I think this year is going to be obviously one of the largest bull markets that we've seen because it just is every time. It's up, longer wait period or consolidation, higher, even longer consolidation. The consolidation always marks more than the hype, which sucks because then these consolidation moments really make the industry suffer. Even though there's a lot of time to build and work on your products, a lot of the market don't deal stuff, but that just shows how early this industry is. And one thing that I've had to reflect on quite a lot is the market cycles, which the Austrians constantly blamed the Chicago school or other schools of thought of. We definitely see these boom and bust cycles happening in Bitcoin, which follows very, very strong Austrian economical theory. So it's interesting. I find that very, very interesting. But yeah, this cycle, I think hopefully what will happen is that the DeFi space will have brought a lot more of the decentralized stability, whether it's on Bitcoin or it's on some of the or it's on an Ethereum chain. But I feel that stability really is the key, and usability, grandma friendliness. has to be there for the next billion users. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. People just get annoyed with it, like they have already. They have already, because they get scammed or they screw it up, and then they don't come back, and they tell their friends not to come back. And that's awful. But we do. I don't want to get into a situation where we're using crypto because CBDCs are so awful. Like, I'd rather use crypto because it's so awesome. And but either way, crypto wins.
We could always wait. Maybe both will be true. Meanwhile, the big bad wolf, Mike Belchi, says the SEC could reject ETF applications until the exchanges and custody are separate. Right now, most of the ETFs depend on Coinbase for the custody and Coinbase for the exchange. Ben Ark, forced prediction, pick a month. When will the Bitcoin ETF be approved? And everyone can play along in the chat or the comments at the home game. Let us know your month. It could even be this year, November, December, or a month next year, or even further on. Ben Ark, forced prediction.
Ooh. I mean, it's a good excuse. I mean, they just want excuses to not allow an ETF, and that is a good excuse. I want it to be December. Well, I want it to be January, but I kind of feel that it could be December. Don't know. I feel like it just happen any moment. So, yeah, I'm going to go with January.
Of course, the Bitcoin halvening now looking like April 23rd. Dan Eve, pick a month.
So yeah, I'm actually going for the fact that although like BlackRock have got a 99.8% success rate, Bitcoin ETFs, spot ETFs have had a 100% rejection rate. So maybe BlackRock just get a kickback. They get kickback just once, and then there's this again. I'm going for this holy trinity, this perfect storm where the spot ETFs just get approved in April when the halvening happens, and then there's just this. That would be cool for an insane mega pump. I don't think it will happen, but that would be my wish. But they make a good point, right? So separating custody and exchange and having one company that pretty much controls like so much cryptocurrency, when they had reasons before with market manipulation and lack of customer protection. But this one's actually, I think, a valid reason about separating.
Already an apologist for the SEC. It's like he's rooting for the zebras. Daniel, pick a month. Will we see the April mega face melting candle? Sorry.
I hate making these kinds of predictions, but what I can predict, is I think we all know the price is just going to begin rising and continue rising. We're over 150% up since last year. We'll keep going as we get closer to the halvening. Maybe we'll see some dips between now and then, but as the media begins to talk more about Bitcoin, which it always does during these cycles, the halving will start to become more, I think, prominent in people's minds. There's going to be a lot of potential customers, who are going to be screaming that they don't have access to this ETF. And at some point, it'll be so loud that I think even the SEC won't be able to resist. So I'll say February. I hope it doesn't take longer than that, but it could. If it goes past the halving, by the way, that's kind of, bad for BlackRock and bad for all the ETFs, because it'll mean they'll have much less access to fresh Bitcoin coming out of miners. There's just going to be less on the market.
That's what I'm quietly rooting for. I know that they're smarter than us and they'll buy beforehand anyway, but wouldn't it be great if we have the supply go down and then the ETF managers are given the go-ahead to start buying their coins because of blah, 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 regulation, whatever, and they couldn't do it at the right time and they're forced to do it at the wrong time. That's what I want. Josh Shigala, I've heard January, February, April, the month of the halvening. Tell us, when will the SEC approve a Bitcoin ETF, or never? Suspense, as Josh is muted.
Sorry, I can't tell you when, but I can say this. BlackRock understand, just like Peter Schiff understands, just like Jamie Dimon understands, that Bitcoin is an unregulated space. The ETF is regulated to all hell, but the underlying asset isn't, so it's massively manipulatable. So if this ETF is coming, there's going to be a whole lot of FUD just before it, so they can, or maybe not even just before it, so they can stack their bags. And so that's what I'm waiting for re-entry points. I'm waiting for bad news coming out of everywhere, and Bitcoin's dead, and whatever other excuses, China's banning Bitcoin, or all of these sorts of things that will happen, and then the ETF will kick in, and then we'll see the face melt candle.
The answer is January. Yes, January. It's cold, it's dark, it's gray. You want to roll these kind of things out once per quarter. So we'll have the halvening in April, second quarter. We'll have the ETF in January. Moving on to issue 2. Bitcoin Ordinals startup Taproot Wizards raises $7.5 million in a seed round. I don't know how, but Taproot Wizards raised $7.5 million to do what everyone else is doing, but now to do it on Bitcoin. Dan, Eve, what do you think about NFT projects in this age, and especially NFT projects on Bitcoin suddenly raising millions of dollars?
I actually think the amount's quite small for a project that is on Bitcoin. I'm surprised it didn't raise more. They've generated quite a lot of hype, and Ordinals putting NFTs, actually inscribing them on Bitcoin rather than being kind of referenced like some NFTs, I think is a big positive. Certainly in terms of how an NFT functions, right, and in terms of ownership, I think that's kind of a cool thing. But they, obviously created a lot of hype in terms of general and consumption of Bitcoin block space. We're seeing, I don't know if it's entirely related, but there was 350,000, I think, pending transactions. It's around about 230,000 now. Fees are about $10 a transaction on Bitcoin. So they've obviously generated a bunch of hype around using Bitcoin's blockchain space, which we know is so sacred. But that's just another project. There's plenty of other Ordinals projects that I think have even raised more than that. So considering how much it's been hyped with these wizard parties and crazy things going on, I do think that's quite low. But Bitcoin will keep on pumping. And I was looking at the stats earlier about the difficulties just reached again. It's like another all-time high, 64.6 trillion, and this time 2 years ago it was 20 trillion. And the hash rate is, I think it peaked over 500 exahashes. It's at about 478, which again is 2 years ago was 150. So there's going to be a lot more competition for block space as things go on. These miners need an incentive to keep mining once the block reward goes down. So this is kind of good for the miners to help subsidize them when the block reward does drop. So wouldn't be surprised if there's some miners who are into these ordinals, because they're creating demand for block space and therefore pumping their own bags, plumping them when the halvening comes and the block reward drops.
You kids and your ordinals and your wizard parties filling up the block space. Back in my day, I tried to make NFTs and I couldn't raise any money. We even lost money. Daniel, what do you think about NFTs on the blockchain, especially the Bitcoin blockchain?
Well, I'm still underwater on the only NFT I ever owned, which is, of course, yours. So, yeah, I'm going to hold that one forever.
I think Josh is underwater on that too.
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't obviously my feelings about NFTs. I never really understood the whole point of it. But what I do see is what's happening on chain. And I see mempool fees just going through the roof again. We had, earlier this year, we were at like 600 sats per VByte at one point. Now we're in the 200 range. I have a channel close on my Lightning node that hasn't gone through. It's been broadcasted at 30 sats. I don't know if I'm ever going to see it. Like, that's the thing is there's all this vandalism being done on the blockchain that doesn't need to be there. And so who's it hurting? It's hurting people who actually need to use Bitcoin for economic reasons, not just shits and giggles. So to me, I don't see the point. People want to make a lot of money. They want to pump money into miners' hands. Sure, go ahead, do that. We'll still be here when you're done.
It's like they're putting too much spray paint on the subway trains and it's slowing them down. Josh Shigala, what do you think about NFTs now on Bitcoin? And of course, you also lost on the Mad Bitcoins card.
I do. I love the Mad Bitcoins card, though. Even though I've lost on it, it is my only NFT. Actually, we minted some NFTs over at the Standard as well, just for fun. Yeah, it's NFTs I find fascinating because of I don't get it. Like just
Josh, I think you muted yourself.
oops. Yet so many people do get it. I don't get it, yet so many people do. And that's what I find fascinating. Why? Why don't I understand it? Why is it thing? And then when I look at the history of collectibles and how money laundering works, then I do get it, because you can easily create an artwork that's valued at fuck all and then pump it to a whole community that it's worth a lot more. But you can do that with coins as well, because coins effectively are an NFT. It's a meme coins, especially. It's a picture of a graphic on the coin, which is referenced by an API on CoinMarketCap or something like that, and propagated across the networks. So I see a lot of these use cases. And so maybe going back to your original question is, will we see altcoin ETFs? Will we see wizard ETFs? Who knows? I think it's a liquidity question at the end of the day. Will enough people really find this interesting? But I don't understand why these guys raised 7.1 million. I've run some really interesting projects that have true capability and a great team, and absolutely struggled to raise. And I just think this is typical. This is typical VC stuff, where you get VC money if you know the VC well. So it's so nepotistic, the whole VC world. Oh, you have to have a warm intro, and you have to have this, and you have to be known, or you have to have already given a blowjob, or whatever it is that these people want. It's awful. Like, the whole VC space is awful, and this is why I actually think the ICOs were a fresh idea to raise capital for projects, even though the vast majority were scams. I thought it was a nice mechanism where people could offer incentives to be part of a project outside of the VC space. The problem was the VCs took over and then bought all these early and made all these deals and then dumped it all on retail. So, there goes that great idea. But fundamentally, I thought it was nice. I've forgotten the original question. Sorry, I just sort of rambled on about that. But yeah, that's my view.
I think the media doesn't understand collectibles either, Josh, as you're having a hard time seeing it, because they can be so valuable one minute and so worthless the next.
Yeah.
Collectibles is commonly something that, it's worth as much as the next guy will pay you for it. Like, you can put the price on the market, $10,000 for the Beanie Baby, but unless you actually have the guy lined up who's going to give you that money, it doesn't materialize. I do think that something about the NFTs, of course, the digital nature of them, the way that they're born online, they exist online, they're kind of better collectibles than a physical Beanie Baby. The ability to send one to another country like that, to receive the money through a cryptocurrency like an escrow, like a locked exchange. You can't do that with a physical object. So in that way, as well as, verifying the authenticity of the NFT, the digital collectible, even if it's just a series of numbers, doesn't even have any art attached, is a better collectible than any physical collectible could ever be.
But interestingly, what I find absolutely fascinating is that the gaming industry, or the gaming user landscape, has absolutely wholeheartedly rejected NFTs. Whenever you bring up NFT game in a game, they come with their pitchforks and fundamentally reject it, even though they'll have a centralized marketplace by the game developer that will be absolutely raping these people for their money for some stupid skins. They still reject the idea of an NFT, which is weird because this is something I do get, yet the market doesn't get. So it's the other way around. I'm like, oh, that's the perfect use case for these NFTs, in-game items, because now you can, have third-party markets. No, market absolutely rejects it. It's almost culturally rejected. So it maybe it'll come in the future, but it'll take a long time to turn that market from just anytime the word NFT, maybe it's about actually changing the word NFT. That's a typical thing to do in marketing, is just change the word. and people go, oh, that's great. I love that one. Yeah.
I do think we're gonna have to do that, but with the gamers, the pessimism, I think it comes from all these free to play games and buying all of these add-ons and buying all of these skins. And I think they have the idea in their head that they're gonna have to pay $10,000 if they want to dress like Batman. I don't think they have the idea where they're going to buy the Batman skin for 50 cents and in 3 years it's going to be worth $10,000. And I think they're also afraid of that idea as well, because they get priced out of these higher markets. Go ahead, Ben.
They don't want secondary unregulated markets for in-game items. It happened like years ago with Ultima Online, a bunch of other big games where you could earn, you could like, farm you could get your character up and you could get all these items and then you could sell them on secondary unregulated markets, and then what you ended up with is sweatshops with a bunch of kids grinding in some backwards third world country for these in-game items, and it's really bad press. So they just want to avoid it. It's like there's totally value for scarcity, digital scarcity beyond just value transfer. Because obviously scarcity is a very important part to how we value everything in our real world. So it makes perfect sense that we need digital scarcity for things beyond just value transfer, and that is, having non-fungible tokens, commodity items, which you can trade in the digital space. So I think NFTs and ordinals, I think, is all really important work. And although it's a bit .com-y currently, and like, people are still trying to find a use case for it, and you end up with all these stupid art projects, like Josh said, which probably use for eventually, like, there will be some good uses which come out of it. And eventually some games will figure out a way of somehow being able to have items which people can actually own outside of the game and have ownership over, and know that the game producer can't produce more of those items, and it can have scarcity and it can have value. But the real worry is just kids like grinding to get things of value and then selling them in unregulated markets. But I think like the current volume on Bitcoin is trading. It's not ordinals. There's a lot of trading going on. So what we're going to do, we're going to like stop people from trading Bitcoin. I think like none of us can say how people use block space. Like if you can use it and you can use it for your thing, use it for your thing. And it's a good thing that we have high fees. It's a good thing that we have a busy blocks, because Bitcoiners have this like unrealistic idea of Bitcoin that because it works for me right now, that it's perfect and we don't need to improve scaling and we don't need to work on any of these things. It's not until we have high fees that people actually start addressing scaling properly. And in the last, when we did have that ordinal wave, there was a lot of good work done on Liquid, and people were finally using Liquid to try and scale, and that's carried on now. And it's, there's ways in which you can use Liquid to, like, with using bolts and swapping. There's ways in which you can like balance channels using Liquid now. It's a lot cheaper than so it's something I want to see. I want to see busy blocks, and I want to see people having to actually address scaling Bitcoin. And if it be through weird crap art, then fair enough. Or if it be through trading volume, then fair enough. And I think eventually we will end up with a whole bunch of things on Bitcoin, because you need scarcity. We need it in our digital world just as much as we need it in our real world.
It was one of the things back in the early days that really fascinated me, was the conversation on Bitcoin Talk about what is spam. Back when first someone said this is spam, when talking about Eric Voorhees' Satoshi Dice game where people were bitching and moaning because people were just spamming the network with sats, and it is a fascinating conversation. What is spam? Daniel mentioned it really well about saying it's graffiti and stuff, and I totally resonate with that too. I understand that, but they paid the fee. And so who am I to say that it shouldn't be on there? And and then you get people like Luke Dash Jr. who just want to ban it by technology, technologically banning it. But yeah, anyway, interesting.
I do agree with Ben that things only get fixed once they're exposed. If you look at the privacy situation on Bitcoin right now, it's so bad that major terrorist groups are rejecting Bitcoin and refusing to use it. Obviously, it needs to be fixed. Let's move on to the exit question. Predicting against the Magic 8 Ball, the source of all truth and knowledge. Most financial firms and large hedge funds use a Magic 8 Ball for their decisions. Dan Eve, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
No, I'm still optimistic. Higher.
Daniel, higher or lower?
I have to say higher. It's going up forever. So that's my pick.
Josh Chagall, it's only positivity today, higher or lower?
Higher, baby.
Ben Ark?
Lower, much lower.
There's always one, and now the Magic 8 Ball, it doesn't often answer. Sometimes it says no. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Very doubtful. Very doubtful. The Magic 8 Ball is pessimistic in spite of all your optimism. That's what it thinks. That's what it thinks of your optimism.
In your face.
Ben is correct. Moving on to issue 3, FTX gets a $1.8 billion boost from soaring Solana and Bitcoin, easing the path to full customer payouts. It's almost like the producers, a self-making scam. Number 1, I make a Bitcoin exchange. Number 2, I mismanage it. Number 3, I owe you money, but can just wait until the price of Bitcoin equals the amount of money that I owe you. I could never lose. Daniel, what do you think about FTX? If no one lost any money, is there even a crime? Should we just let SBF go? The people get their money back now, is what it says.
I was saying the
Investing
same thing
IRS.
about I was saying the same thing about Gemini and Gemini Earn and Genesis. Like they're just going to drag this out as long as they can until the market conditions allow them to sell more and pay off their customers. And I think it's the same thing. And you remember when I forget the name, the Enron guy came in and took over FTX after SBF was out, and he said, "This is the worst managed company I've ever seen in my entire career." So, for them to go through and the process of trying to do right by the remaining customers, I think is important. It shows that there are some responsible people still left in this world and in this industry. And so, yeah, I would love to see, just like it, maybe it takes a while. It won't take as long as Mt. Gox. Isn't that still going on 10 years later?
Still
People
going,
still haven't gotten
still
their
waiting.
money back.
Still
But it's a
going.
way,
Still
it's sort of a method of force hodling, right? I think the big question was, are they going to pay it back at the price it was when they crashed and when they lost everything, or are they going to pay it back at current market rates?
Well,
And
that's
I think,
part of my brilliant producer's scam here, is that I freeze it when the exchange crashes, right? Which is
yeah.
a part of our plan. I freeze the price and then I wait till it goes up, and that's when I pay you back. It's gonna work. Josh Shigala, are you buying? Is there no more crime? FTX is just gonna make the money back,
No,
unless the IRS takes
that's
it all.
precisely right. Like with they wait for, they freeze the funds. I mean, you can say freeze it, or you can say we'll pay back in the fiat value, and instead of the Bitcoin. So Mt. Gox, interestingly, we've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and then the lawyers or the liquidators say, the payout's been delayed. And everyone's like, oh, what? Oh, okay. How long? for how long? They're like, another year. It's like, it's not just a month, because there's a few little things, you know, dots and T's we've got to cross. No, it's a year. And you know what's happening in the background is that the lawyers are just eating. They're basically living off these funds now. And so it plays this race condition almost, where like they just continue eating, so they don't want to stop. I don't know if it's even called a race condition, but it's kind of like this way of this bad game theoretical mechanism of liquidation, where these people can just keep on living because Bitcoin keeps on going up, so they'll just keep on charging. And by the way, our fees have gone up too this year.
It sounds like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy type company. Like, originally the firm started out doing law work, but eventually we just live off the Bitcoin from the Mt. Gox crisis. You know, we just keep living off it, and you know, we can't lose. It's almost as if you could make more money with a flop than with a hit. Ben, Ark, what do you think? Should we start a new Bitcoin exchange intending to fail and just pay back the money later when the price of Bitcoin rises enough to cover up any of our mistakes?
Yeah, typical weird Bitcoin land, isn't it? Where these weird scenarios happen because of the volatility of the price. Yeah, it's totally it's a whole new industry for this, well, career for this company and the people who are working on liquidating FTX, just as it was with Mt. Gox. And every time one of these events happens, there's this big fat pie, and then they all look at it and say, okay, how are we going to divide this thing up? How are we going to take a big fat slice? Every time anything happens, someone dies and leaves a bunch of stuff and has to go through probators, and some company goes under, and everyone gets their slice of the pie. And the trick is for them is just get as much money in their own pockets as they can possibly get. So yeah, we're going to see more of that, and it's going to be delayed on the FTX. It doesn't really matter that the Bitcoin price is going to go up, just like with Mt. Gox as well. It's very sad, but it's also a good reason why you should never keep money on an exchange. Yeah.
It's sad. It's like they're tearing down the family farm of FTX.
Can I just say, like,
Josh?
Just quickly add, just the thing is, it's on Solana, and so you know, basically what they're doing is they're transferring the loss from the VCs that invested in FTX to the bag holders that are getting shilled Solana right now. And so that's what's terrible about this sort of recovery, is like, you're just going to outsource that to the Solana hypers.
I don't know what
did we have it with Mt. Gox as well, that lawyer started selling off Bitcoin? He just started dumping the price because he wasn't. That was Mt. Gox. Was that Mt. Gox? That was like the Japanese lawyer. They started dumping Bitcoin.
They keep saying that the Mt. Gox payout's going to happen, and they keep being afraid that the people being burned by Bitcoin so bad will all sell immediately and that there'll be a run. But the payouts never seem to happen because they're still fighting with that one guy who has the claim on it, who has the counterclaim. In the same way, these payouts may never happen as well, with the IRS claiming that they should take all their money first. So I think, Josh, the real sad part about this is if you were at home with your FTX coupons and you think you're going to win big money, this is like a football game and your team has gone ahead, but it's only halftime and there's no way you can push sell right now. If you think Solana's at a high, if you think it's legit, if you think it's not legit, those are everyone's choices. Those are your options here. And you have no power. You can't say, like, sell my portion of the bankruptcy proceedings. Like get my money out of there now. It's not an option. So Dan, Eve, it's all a matter of timing. Will FTX get away with the ultimate crime of paying everyone back?
Well, I mean, so I saw someone tweet about it. Like, they said, "Man, if only SBF had held on, like, you know, he wasn't uncovered for another 18 months, and you know, then he might have actually gotten away with it." Because you know, things are starting to pump, and maybe some of it's off the back of you know, the fact that the publicity of it all, and the fact that there's, you know, potential buyers of the exchange and stuff that we've heard rumors for. But you know, even if FTT is up 300% in like a week, or something crazy. I think it might even be days. So there's obviously, there's hot hype around it, but I think, as Josh is saying, this is just the transfer of funds, or transfer of fudge, really, from the clever people to the suckers that are getting reeled in. Well, I say that maybe it's going to end up happy days, and the people get their money back. Well, obviously they'll be like once bitten, twice shy, right? They've learned their lesson now. Once they get a bit of their compensation back, take it right off FTX, never put it on an exchange again. And only when it's extreme circumstances where you need to sell, and then just use self custody. And this is one big advert for self custody, right? Every exchange going down is a big advert for self custody. But the other interesting thing about the article is, will the IRS just soak up this money and say, well, you owe us $44 billion in tax? Or will they do the honorable thing, right, and let people have money back who have lost money? How's the IRS going to treat this deficit of FTX? Time will tell.
I'm sure no one would speak ill of the IRS on this panel. But I agree, Dan. I think that Sam Bankman-Fried should have held. He should have had a hard face, and he should have said, everyone will get paid back. We have all the money. Because no one can disprove that. His books are such a mess. Like Daniel said, the Enron guy comes in, says, what an awful mess of a company. And even now with these investments in Bitcoin, Solana, maybe even the AI program, ChatGPT, what if that goes to the moon? And FTX, it turns out, had a small piece of that. Yes, it's amazing. And that's the beauty of my scheme. As soon as I can lock you into a fiat return and I get to hold crypto, I can pay back any debt that I've run up. Maybe even I could build 50 Smithsonians in 50 states. But moving on, check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got 3,258 videos. You could watch them for 3 months, 17 days, and 7 hours without taking a break. You wouldn't even have to sleep. Issue 4. Ferrari accepts Bitcoin. Yes, everyone wanted Lamborghinis, but you're getting Ferraris. Josh Segala, we haven't had a nice luxury brand accepting Bitcoin in a while, and now we have Bitcoin Ferraris. Are these good enough, or do you still pine for Lambos?
Well, actually, the Lambo meme originally came from the ETH space, so it's not. So maybe Bitcoin can have Ferrari. Let's see. I love these celebration. It brings me back to the old days where you can celebrate when a new shop accepts your thing. When Roger Ver managed to get some freaking petrol station to accept a Casasius coin or whatever, like, go. I love those days where we can celebrate a new shop. Nowadays, Amazon accepts it, and we're like, oh, yeah, cool. ETF. When's the ETF? Yeah. So I like this. This is great.
It is exciting that it's an entire company basis, not just one guy going down to the dealership and talking them into it, the same way that the bar accepts Bitcoin because, Jimmy paid them that one time. Ben Ark, can I get you a Ferrari? How's that sound?
It's a nice way for companies, small companies and big companies, to diversify their holdings and their portfolios, just to accept Bitcoin. They're not going to sell that many cars for Bitcoin. And by doing it, they probably want a little bit of Bitcoin in their portfolio. They want to diversify their portfolio, and there's a few percent. I think it's wise, and it's good to see bigger players, because that's always a sell for me. If I'm on board like a cafe or a bar or something, I'm like, okay, it probably makes sense you have a little bit of Bitcoin, and accepting Bitcoin is one of the easiest ways to do it, and accumulate some Bitcoin slowly. It won't be loads, but it'll be a little bit. And often, like whoever owns that bar or cafe is a business person, and they want diverse assets, and they're often quite receptive to it. So I imagine it's the same when it comes to these bigger companies as well. But yeah, I mean, it's great, and like something to be celebrated, and hopefully some other car companies will follow suit.
Dan, Eve, they have fast cars, but they don't even drive themselves. Should we be excited about Ferrari?
Well, you know, Lambo's. We've had the Lambo meme for so long. I kind of like Ferraris, right? So I think Josh got a good point. You know, Ethereum kind of kicked off the Lambo thing, so Bitcoin's got the Ferrari thing. Obviously, for a short while there was the Tesla thing, and we've still seen, you know, no movement from Tesla on accepting Bitcoin again. I'm surprised more companies haven't capitalized on it, even if they don't believe in Bitcoin as an asset and as real money. That they didn't kind of haven't capitalized on the fact that people suddenly got really rich and have this money to burn and been like, okay, we'll accept your Bitcoin, even though they burn it straight away and sell it on an exchange for an inflated rate or whatever, and sorry, accept an inflated rate so they can sell it and get their fair price for the car. So I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of that, but it's great when an actual existing big huge, you know, company that makes beautiful cars or something, you know, accepts Bitcoin. And yeah, going back to as Josh said, like the days when, you know, a coffee shop would accept Bitcoin and everyone would be like cheering about it and, you know, yes, brilliant, yeah, oh my god, yeah, Marge's Fruit and Veg now accepts Bitcoin and we're like one step closer to world domination. This is incredible, everyone. You know, the 2013 buzz of getting all these tiny little like shops loaded up. So I think it's cool, especially when a big company does it.
Daniel, you've been hodling a long time. Is it time to trade in those Bitcoins for a nice bright red Ferrari, maybe with a custom plate that says "Hodl Dog" on the back?
So when I saw the headline, I was like, do we really have to talk about this again? But as you know, as many of you know, a true humble Bitcoin stacking pleb drives a 1992 Toyota Camry and is not concerned with Ferraris or Lambos or any of that. Yeah, I mean, like what Ben said, I think maybe, you know, you'll get a few people who might, you know, want to trade in a little bit and upgrade their ride. Sure, why not? It's good marketing. It brings attention, but it's not going to move the needle for Bitcoin or for Ferrari very much. But you know, what is going to do it is like if I can go down to PubKey in Lower Manhattan and buy a beer, and I can, you know, pay for someone else's coffee over the Lightning Network in Guatemala. Like those are the things that I am excited by, the ability to actually use Bitcoin day to day and not, you know, sell your stack to buy a car, which is, you know, ultimately an appreciating asset. I mean, sure, you could start a business and like rent them out on Turo or something, but you know, who's going to be buying all those Ferraris with Bitcoin? I don't see it. I don't see that many people being swayed by clever marketing tactic.
Oh, Daniel's getting deep here. Fast cars do not make one great. Josh Shigala, how do you flex for people who don't flex? Exit question. What will the Bitcoiners be showing off in the future if it's not Ferraris? Are they going to get rings that say like whole coiner or like tattoos that say like HOLE coin? I don't know.
Well, Bitcoiners have become clever over the years. They try to disguise the fact that they have Bitcoin. In the early days, we were shouting, and now, and then Chainalysis came out, and everyone's like, "Oh, maybe we should just be a bit more quiet." No, I don't know. Maybe it's yeah, maybe it's you got to look out for those people with an old beat up ute with a dog in the back. That's what they're the people you got to watch out for. The farmers.
And that's what Vonnegut always said about the Jesus story. He always said it was written wrong. Guy comes down, says, "I'm connected to God. You better listen to me." And they stick him up, and it goes badly. What if the guy came down and he was unconnected, and then God gets mad at you? It's a much better story that way. Ben Ark, are you going to buy a Ferrari? What are you going to do with the Bitcoin in the future?
I just make this stuff. I don't own any Bitcoin, obviously. But the
horrible boating accident, yes.
No, I never owned it, you know. But the I forgot what I was going to say. What was the question? I'm having a moment.
How are Bitcoiners going to show off?
Oh, right, yeah. Well, there's this
for people that don't flex, especially when we have this example in the community where SBF, famously, we now know, traded in their luxury leases to get a crappy car, purposely wore cargo shorts, purposely Boris Johnsoned his hair so that people would think him a fool and also, poor.
Crazy.
Yeah, that
is that still popular?
With So people will accumulate Bitcoin and then it'll go up in price, and then they'll be like, oh cool, I can retire and I can buy a house now, and I can and then people start spending. Like with wealth, we saw it with people who accumulated huge wealth in the past, as some, they were privy to some backdoor access to be able to create huge wealth. They had some luck in the market or some insider knowledge, or they just had their finger on the pulse and then they created huge wealth. And people spend their money on shit. And although for a while people would drive around in a Suzuki Wagoner, they'll go out and buy some fancy schmancy car at some point, and a big fancy house, and then they'll gamble it all away and put up their nose, and then they'll be poor again, because that's what happens when people get a sudden rush of
Or their
wealth, 'cause they
kids,
tend to spend
or their kids do it.
oh yeah, wayward
Third
kids will do it.
generation.
Yeah,
It's always the
exactly.
third generation.
Yeah, no, it's the third generation, the lazy fucks.
Well, I'm
And then they'll
reminded
have
of
to.
the great Richard Pryor film, and of course, it's based on an 18th century book that I also read called Brewster's Millions. And part of the way that the guy gets his inheritance is that he has to waste millions of dollars. He has to spend money and get nothing back for it, so that he will be exhausted of spending and will be tired of it. And in the same way, I think these Bitcoiners who are essentially punished every time they spend, every time you buy that house, you look back and you're like, I could have gotten 10 houses for that house. I could have gotten 5 cars for that car. It punishes you each time you spend, almost as if it's not a good thing at all, like the monkey's paw, like you've been cursed, but you get wishes. Dan,
But
Eve, what do you think?
we still know incredibly wealthy Bitcoiners who, had that ideology, but eventually just ended up spending all their Bitcoin. Like, we know a bunch of them. So human beings, we like
Even
stuff.
Hal Finney and his family, like the original OG Bitcoiners, had a huge stack, and from what I heard, it's gone, and they didn't hodl. And the same thing for a lot of the early players, Adam Back and so forth, could have bought hundreds of thousands, ended up buying nothing. Like it's
Well,
a big
that's
swing.
the
Yeah.
the biggest example I've seen of that recently is I've been hanging out with Marty Malmy in Nostra and a bunch of Nostra things, because he builds Iris. And he's the second person to contribute to Bitcoin ever, and who's mining Bitcoin alongside Satoshi and Hal Finney. And he had literally tens of thousands of Bitcoin. He would be like a multi-billionaire now, if he kept his. But I mean, he wanted to buy a flat. He bought a flat, and he, for a few 100,000 Bitcoin, and he bought this for this and this for this, and now he's just a normal person with. So whenever I feel bad about the few 100,000 Satoshis I spent on a beer, I think back to that dude and think, well, I could be Marty Malmy. Well, big shout out to Marty Malmy though. Amazing that he's back in our space and building things, and he's doing some great work with Iris on Nosta. But yeah, it's a really interesting story.
I heard that talk in Australia, and it blew me away. He's such a like approachable, warm, smart guy. It's wonderful to have him in the space.
It can be difficult, even psychologically damaging, to have that wealth and then to have effed it up. And I think everybody's done it at this point or another point, maybe not for that much. But the same thing with my producer's scam holds true here as well. One day you'll regret the Bitcoin you spent. It's like a ancient Chinese curse. Dan, Eve, what are the Bitcoiners going to flex with in the future if they don't want to flex?
Oh, well, I was going to say something stupid like proving their net worth, but then that would just be stupid because they're leaving themselves open to attack. And I think I read recently that in Sweden, there's been a spate of like Bitcoiners that have been targeted because they've been, and it's happened before, right? There's been multiple instances where people have been kidnapped and their assets forced. I think there was a guy wasn't there a guy in Russia that got it really bad? He was either killed or something crazy. So yeah, it's obviously, obvious that you need to be discreet, but the difference is between Bitcoin and being rich with other assets, because you could just rock up right to someone who's got a huge mansion and put a gun to their head, but you've got to get their assets out from a bank in some way, and there's all sorts of complications with that. Whereas with Bitcoin, once that Bitcoin's in your hands, like there's nothing you can do about it. You can trace it and stuff, and you can find out where that person spent or moved the funds, whether they whacked it in a mixer and CoinJoin and whatever. But it's 1,000 times harder than actually getting back assets that are done via some form of banking scheme, I think, or so it means that people are a lot more open to being screwed over and being targeted. So you just need to be discreet if you do have Bitcoin. I don't have Bitcoin. I have nothing, obviously. but yeah, no, like it's really bad. Like, I even think when I go to a conference, I'm like, oh, when I leave the conference, I'm like, oh, I better not wear a Bitcoin thing on the way home, just in case someone mugs me thinking I do have Bitcoin, because I do have crypto that they can kind of prize from my hands, but I actually don't. So like, it's a scary thing, even if you don't have the assets, that you could be targeted, because even if it's like, for example, someone says, even if you got like $100 on your ledger, and you're like, oh, you give them $100, and they're like, oh, but you must have a secret passphrase for it. And you're like, what? How do you prove that you don't have a secret passphrase? And that that could get you into a lot of trouble. So it's best people just not knowing and being discreet about it, right?
Well, and think how much that $100 could be worth in the future. You could pay everyone off with that. But I also think, Dan, it's uniquely damaging to early libertarian Bitcoiners who maybe don't want to show the government their full cards and don't trust a bank or a safe deposit box, and could end up in this kind of situation you're talking about, where people just start rolling up on rich Bitcoin houses in New Hampshire and, shaking down their wallets. But it's still not too late to get that whole coiner Bitcoin necklace and to roll out to all the clubs and show the ladies how much coin you made back in the day. Daniel, how are people going to flex their Bitcoin wealth when no one wants to flex their Bitcoin wealth?
They're going to flex their NPub that they created in 2023 to prove that they were there on Nostr. And that is more important than Bitcoin wealth.
Old signatures, just another brag. Like Ben says, if you don't have one of those little boxes and you log into the wrong place with your Nostr key, they could take away your whole social media empire there. That's why you got to have a Nostr signing box. But yes, old signatures are cool. But as I can tell you guys, I've been at that financial conference in Frankfurt or something, and you tell people, oh, I'm a Bitcoiner from 2013, and they're like, you must be so rich. And then they don't believe you that you had no money, because they have never experienced having no money. What do you mean you don't have hundreds of that? Why didn't you just use the money in your stock market account to buy Bitcoin? Oh, you didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars in your stock market account in 2013? What's wrong with you? Anyway, moving on to issue 5. Institutional custody of Bitcoin could kill it, cautions Arthur Hayes. Hayes warns that Bitcoin held by institutions such as ETFs or even Coinbase could kill the libertarian currency ideas of Bitcoin, leaving us worse off than we were before, with a couple of giant institutions holding all of the Bitcoin in the world and the rest of us just sending back and forth database entries. Josh Shigala, what do you think about Arthur Hayes's warning that the ETFs, for as much as they could knock the price to the moon, could lead to a situation where the institutions buy up all the Bitcoin?
They can't buy up all the Bitcoin. That's the point. But
They won't have
so
mine.
I don't. Hey.
Oh, the Bitcoiners in the audience, they're like, it won't get
Oh
mine.
yeah,
Use roll, but
you won't get mine. Yeah, so
you don't have shit.
I mean, it is, there is an existential threat there slightly with the fact that they can pump and dump large, vast amounts and such. But I think it's more of a threat to Ethereum because of their proof of stake architecture. Because once these large players collect enough, so the hope is that other countries will follow and also build ETFs, so that then you have at least 10 or 20 different ETFs around the world that are buying. But everyone knows that there's always London or New York that and these places have the vast amounts of wealth. And the other thing you have is governments printing money and sticking new printed value directly into this thing, buying up even more. Yeah, but yeah, Ethereum has a larger problem with ETFs, I think, than Bitcoin.
Well, and remember the famous slogan of Pokemon, gotta collect 'em all. Ben Ark, are we in trouble? Are the ETFs secretly bad?
This is why a good money is a commodity money and has lots of different use cases, such as shitty art. Because like the more use cases you have for this commodity, even if you're not using it as money, then the more distributed it is across different industries, not only just being used for storing wealth or accumulating wealth. So more commodity use cases on Bitcoin. And I think we spoke about it the last time. I think, Dan, this was the Holy Trinity. It was a poorer country building their CBDC on Bitcoin as an eCash, federated eCash on Bitcoin, like an El Salvador dollar. So I think Bitcoin being used in a whole bunch of interesting ways across industries will stop that type of stuff from happening. But yeah, I mean, like, you should always custody your own Bitcoin, of course, and we shouldn't, because I feel like sometimes with Lightning Network, because it's kind of hard to run and nodes are hard to run, that people have kind of given up on that idea that you should self-custody and you should run your own stuff. And they're now resigning to the fact that, oh, well, now maybe, everything will be custodial, but it'll be like more smart forms of custodianship. And there's definitely a place for that, but the goal always is self-custodial bearer asset, and that's we just need to make that as easy as possible across all the networks which Bitcoin's using, and then distribute as much as possible by having lots of different commodity use cases.
Remember, the cloud is just someone else's computer, and the enemy of my enemy is my enemy. Dan, Eve, we can't trust the ETFs either. What if they buy all the coin?
Well, it raises some good points about like the centralization and the fact that it kind of gives more. Well, it could lead to more state control, right? These existing institutions are all intertwined with government, and so this is kind of gives them governments more of a foot in the door to try and change things and influence things. And we all know how kind of things seem to be. Allegedly, paid pockets and hands crossed, palms crossed with gold and all this. So I think just from a centralization element, and BlackRock's venture into mining investment, and it just seems like there's an encroaching. It was going to happen, but I didn't think it would happen kind of this quickly. Actually, that the encroachment of the biggest institutions. You'd think it would be the smaller ones going in first, but what we're kind of seeing is actually BlackRock going in is the biggest, and you would have thought that other institutions would have aped in a bit sooner. So yeah, I don't think it's. I think it's going to cause a lot of hype. There's going to be some good some good price movement because of it. I don't know how it could negatively impact the price that much, though. I think more from a philosophical point of view that and a political point of view, there's more of a negative influence on Bitcoin. But from a price perspective, these guys just want to make huge amounts of money, and they'll want to make that money with Bitcoin being successful and being big. So I think more from a pillars of Bitcoin perspective, things will be more negative, but price wise, it's probably going to be quite good, and it gives that seal of approval, right? That Bitcoin is an asset that's worth creating BlackRock being involved in.
It's just a standard technology cycle. Inventors make something really cool, and then people come along and screw it up. Just happens with everything. Daniel, is this it? Are they going to screw Bitcoin up? Finally.
I love all the articles that have been written over the years about this is going to kill Bitcoin. Bitcoin is dead. Like, we've seen it hundreds of times, 500 times already. This is going to be one of those ones we look back and laugh at in a few years. And I would start by asking the question, like, what other assets have been killed by creating an ETF? And there's your evidence right there. Like, it's a thriving market. People are investing, they're trading in, they're trading out, they're putting it in their pensions, they're putting it in their 401ks. Like, this is something that's just going to become another commodity that people trade and use, hopefully to supplement their retirement income and pension funds and things that are more stable than what we've seen in the past. And so you can't create more Bitcoin than already exists. We've seen that tried, and it always ends badly. And at some point, someone gets rugged, and you have to show your holdings. And these companies are highly regulated. They're not going to be doing that. And if they do that, then you'll know at some point. So, with 15% of the market actually being traded and the rest of it being hodled, I just don't see how BlackRock or any collection of ETF companies could ever hold more than 50% of the supply. Like, that just doesn't seem possible to me. So I don't see it happening. This just sounds like more uninformed journalism that we're so used to seeing in this industry.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's much more a fear of an earlier age. If you look at it now, the idea of trying to get all the Bitcoin seems almost impossible. But it's a nice thing to worry about and to fear about. And it's important to take these institutions to account that they're here for their profit. They're not here for your revolution or any of the things that previously went on, as we saw during the No 2X and other battles when they were willing to change how Bitcoin worked to ensure their profit. But let's move on to the predictions or story of the week. Ben Ark, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
No, sorry. Why haven't I prepared something? Nothing really, apart from there's some epic PRs in Bits, which will be merging soon. And I think we're coming out of beta soon because we have finally getting a login system put, which is like our final thing we wanted to do before we came out of beta. That Vlad's been working on that. Yeah, just some epic work being done in that world. It's all been bubbling away. So, but apart from that, no, not really. Nothing. Just trying to keep busy and build things. And I think that's the trick, is just keep building things. Yeah, no, nothing juicy. Sorry.
Dan Eve, prediction or a story of the week?
Well, so something today that I just thought I'd mention that just really wound me up is that I went to go and download the QT wallet from bitcoin.org, and there's a stupid ass message on there that says I can't get it from the UK because of like Craig Wright's lawsuit, I'm assuming, which is just so absurd. But anyway, worse than that, obviously, last week I had a new friend, Larry. Larry's dead, unfortunately. He didn't survive very long. Larry the pigeon. Yeah, I brought him in as well. He lived in the house, and because it was nice and warm inside. But I think he succumbed to his injuries. The poor fella. So yeah, maybe I'll have more luck with the next pigeon. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just Larry.
If you're a pigeon that's damaged, just don't land near Dan's house.
I know. Jesus
saying.
Christ. Well, I didn't technically. Barry wasn't my fault. It was some freaking magpie who was pecking his eyes out and stuff. So I didn't even tell Hudson about Larry because I thought, I didn't want, just in case something crazy happened, like he got eaten by a rat or something crazy. Not that I have rats in my house, but yeah, things are a bit strange around here. So, but yeah, no. If you are a pigeon and you're in need of help, I'm still here for you. I'm just not very successful.
A very dangerous rehabilitation program there. Daniel, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
All right. Well, I had one, and then one crossed my wire while we were on this call here. So Sam Altman, the creator of WorldCoin and OpenAI, has just been pushed out of the board. I have not read the whole article. I just saw the headline, so that was interesting. I think what I was going to talk about was just there's been an increase, and this is kind of referring back to what we were speaking about earlier. There's been an increase in attempted hacks of people's cold storage. A lot more now that people are moving to cold storage and self-custody, a lot more scams are on the rise for things like Blockstream Jade and Bitbox. People are getting emails to download software where they put in their private keys. So always be extremely careful when you are operating your devices. Make sure you don't download anything you don't know where it came from, and never enter your seed phrase into a computer ever for any reason. I know that's become standard practice with like the Ethereum and NFT people. They're just throwing their seed phrase in a hole in the internet, and there's MetaMask. Like it's kind of just very bad form to do that. So hopefully people will learn their lesson. But yeah, that was going to be my story of the week. And then my prediction is we're going to get you back on Nostr, Thomas. We have to do it. So welcome back.
I can't even post on Twitter anymore. I'm still using the Twitter app with the bird icon that says Twitter, and I'm pretty sure they don't want me to do that anymore. So my posts have been going automatically to draft. So I'm talking to myself, and it's going real well. But no, I don't want to upgrade the X app, so it gets all dark and Xy.
If
But
we
no, I'll try
if
Nostr again. It's out there. It's just all whenever I go on Nostr, all they talk about is Nostr. So I just don't
if we
know
all
why.
kept our keys, we all went on Nostr in 2021. I think you'll find on this show. Do you remember when we were with the Nostr Twitter client? But then we all instantly lost our keys, so that was sad.
Definitely. And he sent all those test messages in the early test clients, and he didn't even save them, just like Satoshi with his coins. Oops, spoiler. Not supposed to tell people. Josh Shigala, prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Well, the story of the week was that 2 weeks ago we had a breach in the standard protocol where it wasn't a technical one. It was the fact that it was an architectural one. So for those that don't know, the standard allows you to lock up Bitcoin in a smart contract and borrow against it. So you don't need to pay capital gains tax. And you borrow against it by minting your own stablecoin at 0% interest. But the trick that what we make different is that people can swap, can trade locked collateral. So if you've got wrapped Bitcoin and you want to trade into Pax Gold, if the market turns sour, you can do that. And someone found a way to basically control a market of Pax Gold, and it's because it was really illiquid on Arbitrum, which is an L2 for Ethereum. And they basically managed to mint a whole bunch of they put 10 Bitcoin into our smart contracts, which, by the way, they have the keys to. Like, you have your own keys, so it didn't affect anybody else because everybody holds their own private keys. But they were able to mint a whole bunch of EUROS and then drain the liquidity pool and then swap their locked collateral for Pax Gold. Anyway, we patched it. We managed to get hold of the attacker on chain by sending him messages and appealing to his white hat, probably his white hat pass. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of black hat hackers are actually old school white hat hackers who are discouraged and angry because the bounties are so they'll find some huge bounty and get like $10 back for it. And then they get sour and then next time I'm just going to take the money. So if you can, they're not all just bad, evil people. They just have been soured. So that's what we appealed to. They returned most of it to us, the EUROS that was minted, and then we burnt that, and now we're back. It was actually really quick. I got to put a big shout out there to Chainlink and to the Arbitrum guys, as well as Gamma Protocol and Camelot. They all jumped on phones. They all gave us great advice on how to negotiate this and what to do. And we were very transparent. It was kind of good that it happened now rather than in 10 months' time when more people find out that they can borrow at 0% interest on their Bitcoin. And there's a lot more value in the liquidity pool. Like I said, it never did affect or would ever affect people's collateral because they don't lock it up. This is the whole point. This is the whole point of building it. I don't want another what were they called? These centralized places where you send your Bitcoin, you borrow against it. We got to use technology to if you want that option. And so yeah, it's not your keys, not your crypto, and that's exactly what we've built, and that's why it's secured everyone's. But yeah, the news is that everything went back to normal very quickly, and it was a good practice in transparency and understanding how to deal with these sorts of things. And it gets it is hard building these contracts because they get so complex. As Ben would know, when you build a whole complex thing, someone will find something. It's always hard. Luckily we ran Vaultora since 2014, which was a very niche centralized exchange trading between Bitcoin and physical gold. and it had never had a breach, which we thank our lucky stars, but also our technical expertise and our diligence in security on that. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and some guy knows it out there and takes advantage of it. So that's one big major thing with this, and it's never going to be solved in crypto. You can stay down to its primitive level. At the primitive level, it has been solved, except for human stupidity. So, being able to write a C phrase, trusting the pure, as close as you can get to the pure cryptography. You're not going to have a hacker. You'll have the wrench attack, and that's about it. But the more you abstract away from that and allow some of these complex things, which are really useful, but they open up to attack surfaces, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Well, and as you say, Josh, it is important when you're going to loan your money long term like that you want to have a structure that you control rather than something like Celsius where it just goes away overnight. So while it's bad, you guys had this one bad deal that goes wrong, the entire system can't just go away in the way that your funds at Celsius or Gemini or any of these other investing firms could have happened.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, we've had some sad news this week here in Northern California. The Major League Baseball owners have voted unanimously to move the Oakland A's to a smaller market in Las Vegas. This is very disappointing for A's fans who staged a reverse boycott this year, selling out the Coliseum twice. Even the Giants Stadium had sell chants throughout the league. Not a single owner stood up with the Oakland A's. Of course, as you guys know, sports teams are not owned by the local municipalities despite carrying their name. So the Oakland Athletics, although Oakland did pay for half the stadium and the parking lot, all the roads and transit to get there, all the advertising and use of the name, they don't actually own the sports teams. These sports teams are owned by billionaires who then pit these cities against each other to get a better deal of free money so that they can build a stadium so they can then leave again to do the same thing in 10 years. Many of these owners, such as the Phillies and the Tigers and other owners, are going to be able to forced to make these decisions themselves in a few years. So, of course, they couldn't vote against the Oakland A's moving, even though this will create a disastrous welfare team ever losing in Las Vegas, kind of like the Washington Generals in the Harlem Globetrotters League, where they trot them out and they lose for the tourists, almost as if the entire league was a joke, with only the real top teams mattering and the smaller teams just competing during the season so that the top teams can compete at the end. Obviously, I think that Major League Baseball should lose their antitrust exemption, which prevents other entrepreneurs from opening their own baseball league to compete with this congressionally protected Major League Baseball league, which pits cities against each other to build stadiums. It's really obvious now. There's been huge reports written about it, but none of that matters because they're taking the A's to Las Vegas so all the A's fans can go F themselves. So thank you, Major League Baseball. Message received. A's hats put away. But we're running out of time, and this is the Bitcoin group. I'm not supposed to talk about sports or politics, even though they're obviously intertwined. And if only some Bitcoiner could have stood up and bought the A's for way more than they're worth, the same way that someone bought Twitter, we wouldn't have any of these problems. Daniel,
see, there's the answer. That's what Bitcoiners are going to be buying is sports teams, not maybe this cycle, but in 4 years, right? That'll be where you flaunt your wealth.
Seattle Kraken, owned by Jesse Powell, wouldn't be a bad move. I saw Tone Vase talking on Twitter. He wants to own the D Hotel. He says that if Bitcoiners stay in crappy enough hotels long enough, they can just buy the joint. We need a lot of uppricing before we're buying hotel casinos.
I gotta say, like, I've never really been a sports fan because the fact that sports players can just up from the team that they're in and go to a different team. I never really got that. I also didn't get that they celebrated getting this trophy and then next year it's up for grabs again anyway. So I don't know. I've always found it tricky. Maybe they should get an NFT or something instead. that can never be taken away from them.
Ironically, the players changing teams is kind of an individual value thing where they're negotiating against the big monolithic owners. It's much worse before the players could move teams, and they were literally owned by the players as if it were a plantation type system. And I think that's also a reason to be against this with the teams pretending to be owned by a city. They say, oh, they're the Oakland Athletics, when really they're the John Fisher Athletics or the George Steinbrenner Yankees. Like, we shouldn't put these names on them if they're just going to be the Mark Cuban Mavericks. Like, it's one person that owns them, then we should have one person's name on them.
But that's how you get the butts in the seats, is promote the town, because it makes people feel excited and they're part of something.
Like the rock.
Yeah, I remember a radio station would
Good
do
morning,
that. They had these,
Oakland.
Yeah, they had these bumper stickers where it's like, I love, and then the name of the suburb, and everyone just went nuts for it. And I was like, okay, it's really sort of this tribal, this sort of.
It's interesting to see, though, how long these cities will allow themselves to be obviously played against each other. Like, everyone now can look back and they can say, wow, this Oakland thing, it's almost a Hiroshima or a Nagasaki teaching the other cities, this is what will happen to you if you mess with us. If you don't give us free money, and fast too, like we want our free money quick, we will leave to another town. We believe in nothing, Lebowski. Nothing. They're nihilists.
They did that to us in New York when they moved the Dodgers. So, like, this is going to happen forever. I don't think there's a way out, and they know how the game is played.
Well, it's going to happen forever until we make it illegal, until we straight up outlaw it and say, hey, as part of your deal where you have you have a congressionally protected monopoly, a congressionally protected antitrust exemption that we don't talk about every day. We don't talk about Major League Baseball and their antitrust exemption, but we're going to now because we don't have any more baseball games in Northern California. We have nothing to do but attack Major League Baseball. And hey, what if it takes 55 years? That's how long the A's were here. We've got time, and we've got people too. It's never going to end. A's fans are never going to stop.
Instead of making it legal, can't you just, as fans, just do what you do and just boycott, like just drop the whole thing and no one goes, and then the A's just die out, and then that just never happens again? Because I can imagine the A's brand is just destroyed now.
They're still trying to take it with them. It was amazing in their press release. They're like, oh, we've done this before. We moved from Kansas City and Philadelphia and all these other places, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But it doesn't matter. They're just moving on. The brand is burnt. It's actually, again, it's back to the producers again. You can make more money with a flop. The A's get revenue sharing from the other teams, so they get essentially welfare. So they're a welfare team, and they're moving into a situation where they're always going to get welfare. So they're always going to be a welfare team. So everyone else is out there winning and losing, it's suckers, right? The A's are losing on purpose every season for 15 years now. And all the other owners, when they finally get a chance to say, you've been losing on purpose, you've been letting us all down, you're ruining the whole league. They said, no, let us put into a new position where you'll have the smallest ballpark in the smallest media market. And we also changed it so you don't get the top pick anymore if you're on revenue sharing. So if you're on welfare, you don't get better players anymore. So you're destined to always stay there at the bottom. And yet still, the way capitalism works is he's going to double the value of his team and flip it to some other sucker who's going to start complaining about his ballpark being too small and his market being too small. And you know what he's going to want to do? He's going to want to move the team. And we're back where we started again, unless Congress acts to regulate this already regulated industry.
Deregulate.
More regulations. Make us safe. Anyway, we're running out of time. We're talking about sports. The audience is gone. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Be sure to give us a thumbs up down below. Let us know what you think in the comments. They probably stole your sports team too. Let us hear your righteous anger from Winnipeg and Quebec and all the other angry places. Montreal, not just Canadian teams too, though. Other places had their teams stolen. St. Louis and San Diego, all the places. But until next time, bye.
Bye.